Hello everyone. Welcome to the Lightning Ball channel. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and activate the notification bell. Your support fuels my continued efforts. In our previous episode, we explained the situation of Milim's forces confronting the invasion of the insect army. Now, the first climax of the Tenma Great War is about to unfold. In this episode, we'll discuss the distracted Rimuru, the battle between Dagruel and Fenn, and Rimuru falling into Michael's trap. Michael will showcase his despair-inducing power. Let's get started. Hinata isn't the most popular female character in TenSura, at least that's my opinion. However, Rimuru has a special affection for Hinata. During the World Conference, Rimuru was already distracted. The reason was that there was a banquet planned after the conference, and Rimuru had long asked Luminous to design a strikingly aggressive dress for Hinata to showcase at the banquet. Luminous, sharing a similar taste, agreed to the request at a high but reasonable price. The World Conference went smoothly, as the Western nations wanted to make peace with the Eastern Empire, so there were no unexpected situations. Emperor Masayuki was prepared to give the final speech and sign the agreement. Rimuru hoped Masayuki would hurry up so the banquet could start sooner. Perhaps because Rimuru was filled with wicked thoughts, a loud explosion came from the banquet hall, followed by the conference hall shaking. Rimuru quickly looked at Masayuki, but Velgrind was already holding him tightly. Seeing their intimate gesture, Rimuru was speechless. Looking around, the delegates from various countries were very calm. Testarossa was calmly directing the knights guarding the venue to maintain order and investigate the situation. Hinata simultaneously arranged for the Holy Knight Order to strengthen the security of the conference hall and the banquet hall. Rimuru suddenly realized that the most important thing was to ensure the banquet hall was intact. Otherwise, if it was damaged, tonight's banquet would be cancelled, and he wouldn't be able to see Hinata's dress. Rimuru became anxious and wanted to rush over to check immediately. However, just then, Rimuru received a message from Benimaru, informing him that Zelenus's insect army had already attacked Milim's country. This news shattered Rimuru's last bit of hopeful optimism. But Rimuru was not willing to give up. He thought that if he joined Milim's side now and quickly defeated Zelenus, he could return to Ingracia in time for the banquet. Well, I bet if Zelenus knew Rimuru was underestimating him so much, he would immediately destroy the central world. Rimuru's sliver of hope was crushed once again. He then received a communication from Ramiris, stating that according to the protocol, there should be contact between the demon lords every 5 minutes, but there had been no response from Dagruel's side for the past 5 minutes. This was already a very bad situation, one that was highly dangerous even in anticipated scenarios. Rimuru was extremely frustrated. He had prepared an emergency manual for Ramiris to handle such situations, but it still ended up requiring his intervention. Ramiris suddenly remembered the existence of the emergency manual and pretended not to know, then went back to discuss it with the operations personnel. The current situation reminded Rimuru of a day in his previous life. On that day, Satoru Mikami was eagerly waiting for the end of work because his daily online game was scheduled for a major update. However, just as he was about to leave work, the construction equipment at the site malfunctioned. If the problem wasn't fixed, the project would be delayed, so it was a prelude to overtime. Mikami arranged for night lighting and contacted various personnel to explain the situation. By the time everything was resolved, it was already midnight, and he was too exhausted to even play the game. Rimuru felt the same way now. If Michael's side were only attacking one place, it would be manageable, but attacking 2 places simultaneously meant preparing for a prolonged battle. That was to say, the unexpected situation could not be resolved before the banquet, and there was no way he could see Hinata in her sexy dress. Moreover, the enemy's strategy of attacking multiple fronts indicated that one was likely a decoy, and he would need to rack his brains to uncover the trap. Frustrated, Rimuru felt a surge of resentment. Michael and Feldway had deprived him of his enjoyment, and Rimuru vowed to make them pay. Hinata noticed the change in Rimuru's expression and inquired about the situation. Rimuru explained that Michael's side was taking action, and there seemed to be some issues in Ingracia's royal capital as well. Hinata promptly offered to handle the situation in Ingracia with the Holy Knight Order, and Rimuru instructed TenSura to assist her. After making these arrangements, Rimuru carefully listened to Benimaru's report. According to Benimaru, although the attack was sudden, Milim's forces were still capable of handling the situation. Carrera's large-scale magic had signaled the start of the battle, but the insect army had an insect general capable of redirecting various types of magic back at their opponents, leading to a direct confrontation. Rimuru was astonished that someone could throw back Carrera's incredibly powerful nuclear magic. However, he realized that skills related to spatial domination might be able to achieve this. Seal confirmed Rimuru's speculation, stating that while it depends on computational ability, it is indeed possible. Seal further explained that the effectiveness varies with the scale and power of the magic. If faced with directional destructive magic, one could twist space to mitigate the magic's power. However, this maneuver carries the risk of harming allies, so Seal did not recommend such operations. While Seal could undoubtedly perform precise control, Rimuru would definitely reject this approach if it were someone else attempting it. Therefore, Rimuru deduced that Zelenus had a gambler's personality and did not seem concerned about his own side's losses. Benimaru continued to explain the situation on the battlefield. Because Insect Lord Zelenus was also present, Milim couldn't make a move as she wished. Consequently, Benimaru decisively sent 300 Kurenai as reinforcements. The magic teleportation array could transport 50 warriors at a time, and with Veldora's vast magical reserves, continuous teleportation was possible. These Kurenai were led by Gabwa, who had recently confirmed her relationship with Phobio, giving her extra motivation to fight for her lover. However, Rimuru still worried about insufficient combat strength, so Benimaru suggested that Gabta lead 100 goblin riders for further support. To be safe, Rimuru instructed Ranga, who was hiding in his shadow, to assist Gabta. With Ranga's presence, Gabta's safety would be assured. Benimaru laughed heartily, noting that Rimuru-sama still favored Gabta. Rimuru paused, and Benimaru explained that Gabta was a competent officer and didn't require excessive worry. However, Rimuru always felt that Gabta seemed a bit scatterbrained, which was a cause for concern. Benimaru assured him that Gabta was very serious on the battlefield, but then added that perhaps overprotecting him was the right choice. Rimuru couldn't help but feel anxious and asked about the enemy's strength. Benimaru confirmed that the enemy was indeed very powerful and that he was observing the battlefield through Geld's perspective. The insect army showed no fear and tirelessly pressed on, stepping over their fallen comrades to continue their assault. This relentless advance reminded Geld of himself and his companions under his father's domination. Remembering those painful memories, Rimuru prayed for everyone's safety and instructed Benimaru to keep monitoring the situation. If an emergency arose, Benimaru should support without hesitation. After contacting Benimaru, Rimuru initiated another call, this time with Ramiris and Beretta. According to their report, Dagruel's territory had been invaded. Zonda managed to escape to a communicable area and brought the intel, stating that the enemy was terrifyingly strong and urgently needed support. Rimuru noted the description terrifyingly strong. It sounded like a trap, likely intended to force the demon lords to redeploy their forces. Hastily moving large numbers of troops could easily fall into this trap. Therefore, it was better to maintain a certain level of support in each region. Rimuru calculated and realized that the only remaining deployable forces were the Labyrinth's garrison or himself. Although the situation in Ingracia was concerning, with Velgrind, Testarossa, and Hinata protecting it, it shouldn't become too problematic. While Rimuru was pondering, another report confirmed that Dino and Leon had both appeared in Dagruel's territory. This solidified Rimuru's decision. Since Leon had shown up, it was necessary to break his control and bring him back. Despite his lingering desire to see Hinata's dress, Rimuru decided to vent his anger on the enemy instead. With that resolve, Rimuru set out for Dagruel's territory. Switching to Dagruel's perspective, standing before him was his younger brother, Fenn. Compared to Dagruel, Fenn was slightly smaller but still possessed the towering height of the giant race, with very muscular build. After being prisoned for tens of thousands of years without sunlight, Fenn's skin had turned an unhealthy pale color. He had a head of messy green hair and piercing eyes. The most striking feature was the Gleipnir wrapped around his waist and shoulders, the holy demonic sealing chain that had long bound him and had now become his weapon. The two exchanged greetings. Fenn expressed how much he missed his brother, while Dagruel stated that although he also missed the old days, he did not want to see Fenn. Fenn reminded him that they, along with Glass Sword, were three brothers. Dagruel responded that because they were brothers, he was heartbroken and regretful that Fenn had chosen the wrong path. Fenn, looking displeased, remarked that Dagruel had once been his idol, but now his brother seemed like a toothless beast, weak and uninteresting. Dagruel mentioned that they had once rebelled against Veldanava-sama but came to realize the reality of their situation. It was also due to Veldanava's grace that the giant race had continued to this day. Fenn was visibly dissatisfied with Dagruel's words, stating that he would never acknowledge Veldanava as the strongest and that he could not stand his brother's weakness. He explained that his support for Souei in reviving Veldanava was so that he could have a decisive battle with him. Hearing Fenn's rebellious words, Dagruel harshly rebuked his brother's foolishness. Fenn responded that it seemed they could not find common ground through words, so he would wake Dagruel up by force. As soon as he said this, both Fenn and Dagruel were enveloped in a vortex of fighting aura, creating such intense pressure that even the sturdy Heaven Tower began to shake violently. In the next instant, accompanied by an earth-shattering impact, Dagruel's fist struck Fenn's face. However, Fenn didn't even flinch. Then, with a sharp sound, a heavy uppercut landed straight into Dagruel's abdomen. Unable to withstand the blow, Dagruel's body was uncontrollably sent flying into the air. Fenn didn't miss this opportunity and followed up with a whip kick, sending Dagruel's massive body crashing into the wall of Heaven Tower, causing the entire tower to creak as if it was about to collapse. However, Dagruel nonchalantly stood up and praised Fenn's strength. Fenn also complimented Dagruel, noting that only a few would have been able to withstand a single blow from him. Dagruel remarked that he was a member of the Octagram Demon Lords. Fenn was surprised that his brother valued such a meaningless title. Immediately after, Dagruel fully unleashed his fighting spirit. His existence points exceeded 40 million, although not as high as Fenn's 60 million, the outcome would still primarily depend on the actual combat performance. Switching to Leon's perspective, standing in front of him was Dagruel's other brother, Glass Sword. Compared to other giants, Glass Sword was slightly shorter, but still reached 2 meters in height. His skin was yellowish, and his purple eyes contained both reason and wisdom. Unlike other giants who preferred unarmed combat or clubs, Glass Sword uniquely favored using a two-handed great sword, a weapon that required skill. Glass Sword's existence points were less than 2 million, making him seem quite fragile among the three brothers, but his skill level was the highest. Now shifting to Dino's perspective, he faced Veyron, who had a gentlemanly demeanor. Besides the 7 primordial demons, Veyron was the second strongest, right after Moss. However, matching Dino, one of the 7 angels of origin, was clearly impossible. Nonetheless, compared to Ultima, who had to deal with both Pico and Gracia simultaneously, Veyron's situation was much better. Ultima's decision to have Veyron face Dino was well considered, as Dino was unlikely to fight seriously. By having Veyron, who was weaker than Dino, engage him, Dino could openly delay the battle. As Ultima predicted, Dino didn't want to fight. Although he couldn't openly hold back, he did his best to stall. Dino even justified it to himself, thinking it wasn't laziness but a desire not to betray his friends. Returning to Dagruel's side, both brothers felt a long-lost surge of bloodlust, ready to fight with all their might. In an instant, Fenn's fighting spirit began to swell, his power rivaling that of the true dragons, transforming into an overwhelming pressure. Not to be outdone, Dagruel infused his body with fighting spirit, transforming into his combat status. The brothers fought fiercely, each driven by their own goals. Fenn wished for Dagruel to return to the wild and reckless brother he once was, while Dagruel sought stability and order. The battle intensified, and the initially evenly matched fight gradually tilted in Fenn's favor. The deciding factor was Fenn's adept use of his weapon, Gleipnir. This weapon, handcrafted by Veldinava, held a high status even among mythical weapons. It not only had flexibility but also an indestructible attribute. Fenn, having been bound by Gleipnir for ages, found himself able to manipulate the chains that once restrained him. Dagruel's body was tightly bound by Gleipnir. Fenn, with a sinister smile, declared that he would make his brother experience the torment he had endured. In an instant, Dagruel and Fenn's souls connected, and their memories intertwined. Dagruel remembered those days of madness and Fenn's long suffering. With a smirk, Fenn extended his hand to his brother, which Dagruel firmly grasped. Dagruel declared that it was time to show the world the might of the giant army. From that moment, one of the octogram demon lords ceased to exist, and the ancient destruction god was revived. Following Dagruel's command, the giant army was renamed the Chain Giant Army. They marched into the depths of the desert to reclaim their former glory. Glassword, who was fighting Leon, instantly understood the situation and ceased his battle with Leon. Seeing the current situation, Ultima felt like crying. Things couldn't get any worse. Their allies had decreased, the enemy had increased, and the new enemy was Dagruel along with the entire giant army. It seemed utterly hopeless. Fortunately, the giants ignored Ultima and marched towards another target. Veyron, fighting Dino, communicated through telepathy that the correct course of action would be to retreat. Ultima felt that retreating would make her lose face in front of Rimuru-sama. Her mood worsened until she made up her mind a moment later, telling Veyron to stall the enemy as she believed reinforcements from Rimuru-sama would arrive soon. Soon after, Diablo's characteristic laugh echoed, declaring that Ultima had made an excellent decision and deserved praise. Yes, reinforcements had arrived. Rimuru, Diablo, and Souei had used the teleportation magic circle to quickly reach Ultima's battlefield. They witnessed an astonishing sight. The giants were chaotically gathering but soon formed a coordinated army. Although Dagruel stood at the front, he didn't seem like the same person. When their eyes met, Rimuru sensed a very ominous aura. But now was not the time to fight Dagruel. The priority was Leon and the others. Dagruel also showed no intention of clashing with Rimuru, as the giants appeared to have other plans. Rimuru, Diablo, Ultima, Souei, Veyron, and Zonda formed a 6-person team, while their opponents were Leon, Dino, Pico, and Gracia. Dino was shocked to see Rimuru, who jokingly said that Dino's matter would be dealt with later. Focusing on Leon, Rimuru's intention was clear. Although Leon and Dino's bodies were under Michael's control, they still retained some degree of free will. Thus, Leon did not resist, and Dino obediently stepped back, allowing Rimuru to deal with Leon. In an instant, Rimuru used his God of Void skill to transfer Leon to the imaginary space, where Seal forcibly used skill alteration to sever the control circuits of the Lord of Justice. Just like that, Leon returned to being an ally. Next up was the lazy Dino, who had no motivation to resist, making him an even easier target. However, just as Rimuru was about to finish things, a powerful aura suddenly swept in from all directions, resembling the oppressive presence felt when true dragons unleash their full power. Rimuru realized that Michael had arrived. Diablo remarked that they were indeed being underestimated since Michael had come alone. The newcomer was Michael, who had replaced Rudra and had the same face as Masayuki. Rimuru declared that Leon was now on their side. Michael calmly replied that he had already obtained the ultimate skill Lord of Purity, and that Leon was merely bait. Hearing the word bait, Rimuru fell into thought. It was clear from Michael's words that his strategy had been to use Leon to lure Rimuru away from the World Conference. Rimuru realized that Michael's true target was Masayuki. He had fallen perfectly into Michael's trap. However, there was a way to counter it. If Rimuru could escape and return to the World Conference, Michael's plan would naturally fail. Rimuru maintained a calm demeanor, taunting Michael that it was too early to feel victorious. Michael, exuding confidence, claimed that the moment he decided to personally intervene, Rimuru's chances of winning vanished. Rimuru was puzzled, Even though Leon was now on their side, Michael seemed completely unconcerned, as if he had another foolproof strategy. Michael then stated that Rimuru and his allies were insignificant. Souei was naturally cautious, so Michael cooperated with his plans, but had he acted from the beginning, the war would have ended long ago. As soon as Michael finished speaking, Diablo suddenly collapsed beside Rimuru. Rimuru was startled because he had been on guard, so it shouldn't have been a sudden attack. This was the first time Rimuru had seen Diablo fall, which was unsettling, even though Diablo was still alive but completely motionless. Next, as Souei approached Diablo, he also collapsed. Rimuru panicked, and in that instant, Leon, who had just picked up his sword to fight, also fell. Rimuru was stunned, completely unable to understand what had happened. Even Dino and the others were equally bewildered. It seemed that only Michael, who wore a casual expression while attacking, understood the current situation. Even Seal appeared to be at a loss. Not knowing what had happened, Rimuru couldn't even attempt to flee. Rimuru immediately ordered Ultima to take the three fallen comrades away from the scene. Seeing Ultima hesitate, Rimuru commanded her to follow the order, claiming he had another plan. But in reality, Rimuru had no plan. Diablo, struggling through the pain, stood up, insisting he could still fight. Rimuru felt slightly reassured, but Michael remained calm and confident, as if he was certain he could defeat Diablo no matter how many times he stood up. Rimuru ordered Diablo and Ultima to retreat immediately, emphasizing that it was an order. As he spoke, he drew his sword. Since Michael's target was Rimuru, it was best for the others to escape. Diablo and the others reluctantly obeyed, realizing that staying would be pointless against such a powerful opponent. Fortunately, Michael showed no interest in them. Thus, the battle became a one-on-one confrontation between Rimuru and Michael, with Dino, Pico, and Gracia also present. Rimuru's lack of panic had a reason. As long as Veldora was around, Rimuru could be revived. However, since this method had never been tested, Rimuru worried whether he would still be the same after revival. At this moment, Michael made his move, telling Dino and the others they could leave as Rimuru was his to handle. Dino was surprised, but Michael explained openly that he didn't want to control Dino and the others' minds completely as it would remove their ability to adapt. However, since they were not fully controlled, they were only half-hearted in their efforts. It was clear that Michael knew Dino and Leon weren't truly loyal, so Rimuru had been thoroughly outmaneuvered. Rimuru couldn't help but acknowledge that even Seal could miscalculate. However, Seal firmly stated that this was also part of her plan. Rimuru felt a headache coming on from Seal's stubborn competitiveness. Returning to the battle, Rimuru decided to go all out. Michael's existence points were roughly estimated to exceed 100 million, 10 times that of Rimuru in his normal state. Rimuru felt certain he would lose this battle, but embracing a completely relaxed mindset, he found his mood lightening. However, Seal remarked that having high existence points didn't necessarily mean anything. What mattered were output and skill proficiency. Simply having a lot of energy wouldn't determine the outcome of a battle. Rimuru thought Seal was being a bit self-deceptive with that reasoning. More importantly, there was the mysterious attack that had knocked Diablo down. Although it was unclear how it was done, Rimuru had a nagging feeling of familiarity. Seal also mentioned that the attack seemed somewhat familiar, and that with a bit more time, she could figure it out. Rimuru couldn't help but admire Seal's reliability, as she even anticipated such an attack. However, Seal admitted that this time she had completely miscalculated. Rimuru adjusted his mindset, realizing that this was an unavoidable situation. As long as they used this opportunity wisely to uncover the mystery, they could achieve victory next time. Despite his worries about successful revival, Rimuru felt that he needed to give it his all here. Thus, with the Hall of Heaven Tower as the stage, the one-on-one battle between Rimuru and Michael was about to commence. Alright, that's all for this video. In this part of the book, the battles in Ingracia and Heaven Tower are depicted in an interwoven manner. Therefore, we will first analyze the fight between Rimuru and Michael in one go. In the next 2 episodes, we will describe this battle in detail. The first half of the battle will actually feature Cronoa versus Michael, and simultaneously, how Seal facilitates Rimuru's further evolution. We will explain this in detail in the next episode, which you definitely don't want to miss. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support is greatly appreciated. See you in the next one.